Are ghosts real? Several recent encounters suggest there might be more things in heaven and earth than we can dream of.
So are werewolves just a Hollywood creation, or do half-man, half-wolf creatures really exist? Now, tonight, we kick off our Conspiracy Theory Month series, which was
The legend of the vampire actually goes back for centuries, and it exists in some form or another in almost every culture. In fact, some people believe the first vampire story was in the Bible.
Well, for decades, only crackpots and crazy people believed in UFOs. That's what I thought anyway. And then in recent years, it turns out that governments have been taking them seriously all along.
Try and clear up an ancient mystery with the help of a prominent veterinarian who says she can prove that Bigfoot exists and that he's related to all of us.
New reports, 5 pilots coming forward over the weekend saying they've had multiple mid-air encounters with high-flying, fast-moving objects.
Hello, folks, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Celestial Oddities Oddworld, the show where we take on phone calls from all around the globe to listen to encounters and experiences of the strange and supernatural. From ghosts and hauntings to cryptid and strange creatures, UFO sightings, and much, much more. As always, I'm your host, Garrett Jagaman, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Whether this is your first time checking us out or you are a return listener, we do want to welcome you. We bring you multiple shows per month, not only from Oddworld, but also Pair of Normal Guys podcast, both under the header of Celestial Oddities. What Pair of Normal Guys podcast is a podcast where Daniel James and myself pick specific subject matter and dive deep into that by giving our theories and different ideas and thoughts on that subject. We have done shows in the past on shadow people, sleep paralysis, inner earth civilizations, Sasquatch, and much, much more. So make sure you check out all past and present episodes. And as I said, you can check out this show as well, where we hear great stories and tales from all around the world. Make sure you always hit the like button and share button and follow button. Whatever buttons they give you, go ahead and click on it, because the more that you do that on whatever platform you're listening to us on, the more that it moves us up the podcast community rankings, the more people that discover the show, and ultimately the bigger and better things we can do with the show. With that being said, we are aired on all online major retailers or streaming platforms out there, from iTunes and iHeartRadio, Google Play, Spotify, Spreaker, and much, much more. So feel free to listen to us from the comfort of whatever you normally listen to your podcast from, and we would love to have you join the show. All right, guys, we have our first caller on the line this evening, and we're going to go ahead and let her tell you who she is, where she's from, and a little bit about the encounters that she's experienced. Welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm so happy to be on today. My name is Barbara Suzanne. I currently live in Ohio, and I have had paranormal experiences all of my life. I grew up across from a cemetery, and I worked for a cemetery, and for a while was in cemetery preservation also. I've lived in haunted houses, owned some paranormal businesses, and I was a paranormal investigator for quite a while also.
So you have quite the background in the paranormal side. I like it.
It's just always fallen into line. That's just been my life. Well, it started when my parents moved us from Pennsylvania to Orlando, Florida. I was 10 years old, and they moved us into a haunted house. We lived there for probably 2 or 3 years before we came out and told each other about all of the experiences. And some of them were visual that we could see. And there was a little girl there who would wait until there was only one person home and call Mommy, all drug out, Mommy, from the back of the hallway, and it would make the hair on your neck and arms stand up.
I would imagine it's very eerie.
It chased me out of the house many times.
Okay.
It would hide my homework. I had all of my family looking for my homework, and after 10 or 15 minutes, we'd look back to where we started, and there it was.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We had a console TV, and I don't know if you know what that is, but in the 60s and 70s, it's a big old TV with solidly on the ground with a turntable with it also.
Yes.
And it had knobs on it, unlike the TVs now. And when I was homesick watching TV, I would have to go and get the portable TV and bring it out into the living room to watch, because it would turn the knobs. You could see the knobs turn. And by this time, we were getting acclimated to living with a haunted child. And we would talk to it and say, well, now you better stop that. And I'd get up and I would turn the knob back, and within a couple of minutes, you could see like the vertical or the horizontal knob turn. So I would have to go and retrieve the other TV that I could watch. There were cold spots, and we didn't have air conditioning. Most people didn't have air conditioning in the 60s and 70s in Florida, and a cold spot in the middle of the room in 110-degree weather just doesn't happen. And in that same spot, there would be the smell of flowers also.
Okay.
It was incredible living there. And now that I'm older and realize, I'm not sure if that child was there before we got there, or if the fact that I got a Ouija board for Christmas shortly after we moved there. And of course, being a child and not knowing better, I used it all the time. It was a game. And I could have pulled something into the house, because later after I moved out, my sister had said that there are some things that happened that were much more scary to her. People hovering over her, waking her up when she was asleep, things like that.
Now, did you notice anything prior to, playing with the Ouija board as a child? Was there experiences that you can remember previous to that, or did it all really begin, or at least from what you remember it beginning, once you started playing with that?
Right. I was only 10. That was a long time ago. So I didn't, even at that time, I didn't correlate the two. It's not till many years later when I realized what a tool, a Ouija board is, and the proper way to use it. Yeah,
because it definitely, that's the misinterpretation a lot of people have, is there's certainly a right and wrong way to do it. A lot of people don't believe in them. A lot of people believe that they're absolutely just evil and nothing else, which I don't believe. I believe it can be used to communicate with both good and bad, but there's just very, select ways you need to go about how you do it, who you contact, and what you say. But as you said, it could have been a spirit that was there, prior to you guys, taking residence, or it could have been something that, certainly was channeled of some sort through the Ouija itself. But you never felt, on your side at least, I know your sister had a little bit of a different take on it, but you never felt personally, in harm or in danger and fear, anything like that from your end?
Well, I'll tell you when I stopped being fearful. I heard that call, and I tell you, just talking about it gives me goosebumps all over my body. Just hearing that little girl call her mommy from the hall. I was home alone, scared to death. I ran around the corner into the Florida room, and I remember being back against the wall, just holding my chest. I was so afraid. And this feeling of warmth and calm came over me, and I was never afraid of her again.
Okay, well, that's good. Then she was showing you a sign that, her presence might have startled and scared you, which is normal as a child, but that there was nothing to fear from her, which is good, because, I think as a kid we're all scared. I grew up in a very heavily haunted house as well, and, when I was a child and I would see the apparitions that would show themselves, and that was one thing that was very strange about my house, is a lot of times people hear things, they have experiences. Mine was a very heavily visual home where I've seen a lot of apparitions in the hallways and in different rooms of the home. And for the most part, none of them were harmful. And I would be startled and scared when I seen them, but as I grew older, I realized there was nothing to actually fear from them. What was scaring me was just the actual being startled. There was a couple things that I would see in my house from specific ones that did bring a different type of feeling. Years later, I looking back on it, I don't know if they were, malevolent of any sort or maybe just of a different type of frequency, but I'm glad to hear that you got the warmth, to be shown that it was nothing to fear, because I know as a kid I was terrified, and then I kind of came to terms with it and said, you know what, there's actually nothing to fear.
Well, that was the first time that I had felt comfortable, and all the times before I was scared out of my wits, because I seem to attract the paranormal. I'm very sensitive and an empath, and have different abilities, different gifts, I call them. But it was some kind of experience. And saying about your house and your experiences, it sounds like you might have had a portal in your house.
Oh, there was definitely some sort of portal, I believe, because it wasn't just one spirit or two spirits. There was multiple. I mean, thinking back on it, I would say there had to have been roughly 5 that I can, off the top of my head, think of. Couple of them were connected with one another. The original sighting I ever had as a child, I was about 7, was a full-body apparition in my hallway upstairs of an older man who stood there and stared at me. Ended up being the previous owner from many years prior, and then we would see the apparition of a dog more than anything, which was his dog that also passed away in the home. So those 2 made sense. Now, 3 of the other things that we seen in the home had no connection that I could find to history of the home, to the land, to anything that I could connect it to. They were just 3 different individuals or entities that for some reason were in that home. So as you said, I've often thought over the years that home was some sort of gateway or portal to something.
Right. Yeah, it can be really scary, but it can be really, really fascinating once you get over the fear and you become a little bit more aware of the way the spirit world works, I guess.
I fully agree, because I think, you like myself were both kind of similar in the regard that we both did have haunted homes growing up. We were both sensitive, or both are sensitive. I certainly still pick up a lot of different things. I still am a paranormal investigator, so I go out and investigate a lot, but I've always been able to pick up things a lot quicker than most. I see and sense things that others don't. I've always just been very sensitive to that world. And I think, even if I wasn't as sensitive as I am, I think I still would have been enthralled by it, because I think growing up in a haunted house, if you learn to conquer that fear, it ends up becoming something, as you said, that's a fascination. But when you are an empath like us and you pick up things that others don't, I think it kind of leads you down that path, because it's almost like a calling of some sort.
Right. And for some reason, they become attracted to you. And gosh, I'm living in a haunted house right now, and it's an old farmhouse, and they slam the cabinets, and the lady bakes up some bread that smells so awesome.
Okay. Interesting. Now, how long have you guys been in that home?
Oh, about 8 or 9 months. We're renting and looking for a place to buy and build.
Okay, so it's something that's a little bit of a newer venture, but since you've been there, you've certainly been experiencing some activity then.
Right. The house is over 100 years old, about 110 years old.
Okay, so definitely some history there. I'm sure over the years there's been a lot of different energies that have come and gone from the house. Whether someone passed away there or not, don't always believe is the key factor to it. I mean, I believe firm believer that a lot of just energies, accumulate and can form, certain apparitions as well. So places like schools, hospitals, police stations, and prisons, it's not necessarily, just the spirit passing away or the person passing away that leaves behind a fractal of their soul. It's just the energy itself that the walls hold and the structure holds that I think can certainly leave, reminiscing pieces behind, such as, like you said, the baking. Maybe that was something that someone did quite often there, and it just kind of replays over and over again.
Right, that's called a residual haunting.
Yep, absolutely.
It's like a movie that gets stuck and it just replays over and over again. There's one that's really popular, I'm sure everybody's seen on TV, about the Civil War soldiers going through the woods across the battlefield, and people have recorded it. It's pretty awesome.
Well, absolutely. And then, like, a lot of times in prisons and things, you'll hear residual footsteps of just the guard making his rounds, walking around the cell blocks, and you just hear someone walking in circles over and over and over again, because that's what they did for thousands of hours in their life as their career. And when they pass, that residual energy is still continuing to do its job.
Exactly. It's a little bit different from different types of hauntings. So that is one that will continually stay in that area. I don't think I know of anybody who's tried to clear a house from a residual haunting.
Yeah, I don't even know if you could, honestly. I don't know if any type of sage smudging or anything like that would get rid of that. I think that's something that's just kind of continuous and constant.
It's like it's in the building itself.
Yeah, it's kind of
in the
weaving
trees
itself
or
in.
The area.
Absolutely.
Right.
Now, did you know at a young age, I mean, when you were in Florida and you started to experience this, and as you became a little bit more comfortable with it, realized that you were picking up things a little bit more than most other people out there, was that something you kind of told yourself, I want to follow more in this field? Or, when did you start to say, hey, I want to make a business out of the paranormal, I want to get more involved? Where was that turning point at?
Well, I guess it was when I had small children and I wasn't working and was looking for something else to do. I have a lot of friends in the New Age business, and one of my girlfriends, Andrea DeMichaelis, she owns Horizons Magazine in Florida, and she told me that she would be happy to go into business with me. And this was in the early 2000s, and that we could advertise in her magazine. And we just had a blast doing it. I mean, we would take people to a haunted restaurant, and then maybe we would go to a haunted lighthouse, and then we would go to the Casadega Hotel, which is a hotel in a spiritualist community about a 30-minute drive north of Orlando. Okay. And we would stay in the hotel and have readings, and, go to the spiritualist church the next day and then have readings again. It was a lot of fun, and everybody enjoyed it. But there was one time that I guess it was probably on the second tour. I had some girlfriends with me that I personally knew, and we had a tour guide. Her name was Carol. She was one of the resident mediums that actually lived at the hotel, and she was giving us a tour of the entire hotel. We walked up to the main staircase, and she had her back turned to us and told us about some of the history. And as she turned around, she said, "Oh, I see some of the resident spirits are peeking around the corner of the staircase." So, of course, we all took pictures. And the pictures did show quite nice orbs on them, by the way. And everybody looked, took pictures, and then Carol went in to take everybody into the dining room. But I stayed there and said, "Please come and visit with us." And this was the first time this had ever happened. I know it's happened since then, but it flew down the steps, this energy. It swirled around myself and my girlfriend Karen, and it was almost too much for her. She went back into the dining room, and I grabbed her and pulled her back and said, "No, stay." Yes, the spirit thought I was talking to it because I could feel it, the electricity and the icy coldness start to leave. But when I said, "No, stay," it came back, flew around us again a couple of times, and then went straight through us.
Wow.
It was unbelievable. We just stood there and looked at each other, and that was probably at about 8 or 9 o'clock, and we couldn't sleep until 3 a.m. It was we were both so energized. It was incredible.
It is an incredible feeling. I mean, just to feel the electric, that buzz, the certain tingle that it gives for anybody who has experienced an encounter like that. It's undescribable to any, or uncomparable to anything else out there. There's just a certain feel, a certain aura to when an entity is truly visiting you and letting you feel its energy. So it's great that obviously you've got to experience that multiple times, but the hearing of your first time, that's great. That it, let you know that it was there and was visiting you.
Right. I had felt the cold areas and, different, like you understand, different energies, but that took my breath away. I couldn't even breathe while it was around me and going through you. It was incredible. It was life-changing, and if I wasn't hooked before that, I was completely hooked after that.
And I think everyone that is hooked can always jump back to the moment that hooked them. So as you were just telling your story, that you knew that was the moment that solidified itself, that you would be into this for the rest of your life. And that certainly, I have my moments as well, that there's been a few that have done that to me, but a specific one that kind of jumps out to me as well, and it kind of hooked me. And so I know exactly what you mean. When something just happens that is so profound that you're like, wow, how could I not follow this the rest of my life?
Exactly. And there have been times when I've stepped away, but things happen and I just keep getting pulled right back into it. I have had a lot of experiences. I'd like to tell you about one more thing that happened, and this was not pleasant.
Absolutely.
My husband and I, he was working in, I don't remember the name of the town, but it was real close to Lake Erie in Ohio. And we stayed at a bed and breakfast. He and his crew that he was working with rented the top floor of a bed and breakfast. So it was the third floor. And it used to be the servants' quarters. And they had, everybody had their own room and one kitchen. But it was really strange. You could feel the heavy energy, but one morning, this didn't even happen at night, it was in the morning. I stayed there for about a week. And I woke up to something holding me stiff. I couldn't move. I could barely breathe. And the smell of sulfur was almost nauseating. My husband was still asleep next to me, but of course he was oblivious, and I couldn't move. And I struggled with it for a while, and it wouldn't let me go while I was struggling. And finally I stopped struggling and it let me go. I could tell that it was going because the odor dissipated. And it wasn't like the odor lingered for a long time. I mean, when it left, it left.
Yeah, it comes suddenly and it leaves suddenly. I know exactly. I've had several encounters, unfortunately, of that more malevolent, darker side, and I know exactly what you're speaking of.
And the fear that I felt for absolutely no reason, and as soon as it left, my fear was gone. I was totally horrified. And it had been many years. I'd been doing paranormal investigations, before that. So I knew what was going on, but it reacted with my energy so badly. It wanted to make me afraid. It was something in there that wasn't really nice. And then it happened another time, but I knew what it was by then. I don't think it was quite as severe.
Well, it's interesting that they can do that too, because as you said, it's not you being afraid, it's it making you afraid. It has the power and the ability to control your emotions and your fear. So it's not something like, oh no, I'm afraid to go in there, or I don't like being in here, I'm starting to be afraid. No, it's all of a sudden I am stricken with a heavy level of fear, just frightened, and I don't know why, but I can't shake it. It's causing me to feel that way. Just as all of a sudden, the smell comes, and then as it dissipates, boom, it's gone. The fear's gone. All of a sudden, you're back to normal. It's amazing to know that it's so powerful that it can control that. And I've certainly felt that a few times in my life, and the sulfur certainly has happened a few times, and I've had direct encounters, unfortunately, have had 2 direct encounters specifically with demonic forces over the years. I've been doing this a long time. I've had a lot of great, amazing residual encounters, regular, apparition and spiritual encounters. I've felt the heaviness many, many times, which can be good or bad, but no, there's been 2, possibly 3, over the life that I've, certainly been investigating that just purely evil. And it would be exactly as you said, the smell, the fear. Now I have yet to ever, knock on wood, I never hope to, have the sleep paralysis or the just, paralysis in general. We actually had a subject on our show here, Daniel James and I, my co-host, about shadow people and sleep paralysis, because them two go hand in hand a lot of times. And I have had a lot of callers over time call me and talk to me about not being able to move and something holding them down like that. So it's a very common thing, and I just always kind of wonder why that is.
I do not know, but the energy was very angry. I do remember that, and I don't know why some spirits, either human or non-human, have more energies than others. I don't think anybody's quite figured that one out yet, but hopefully, I'm a firm believer in physics, and I think that everything is going to be explained through physics.
I'm a firm believer myself in physics and how metaphysics and things like that really affect what we see, what we feel, and what's around us. So I'm a firm believer in that also. And I think you're right. I think that eventually there will become a day where pretty much most of everything that we've been wondering on these questions of spiritual energy and why some linger, some don't, what are the different feelings and forces of energy and of hauntings and ghosts, will be explained in one manner or another due to, quantum physics, metaphysics, and physics itself.
Exactly. And the multidimensional, I believe the multidimensional beings are what we call demons.
Yeah, I agree. I think we put the caption on them as demons, and that's to say that they're evil. And I don't necessarily like that. I hate to necessarily say, okay, this thing frightened me, it was evil. It's easy for us to use that as humans as a way for us all to convey and understand from one another. But I like to think it's really just something different. It's something from another dimension in some cases that might not be our definition of evil. It's just, it is what it is. It doesn't have that.
And it's different. And it's different and scary, and that's why people have labeled it that.
Exactly. They feel a feeling from it that they don't like. It's not happy to them. So to you, it's evil. You say, wow, that's not a good thing. And it might not be good, from our definition of what someone or something that's good is, but it is what it is, and it might not know any different. It comes from a different place. And sometimes I think that those loopholes crisscross one another. As you said earlier, there's certain areas that are portals and certain areas where I think the veil is thinner and it allows for more activity to happen. And I certainly grew up, like I said, in one of those places, which I think is what enthralled me to be, in this field for life, I believe.
Right. Yeah, I think I will always be interested and try to spread the word about the paranormal and how it's actually connected to science, I believe. And, everything that you've said are my beliefs also. I've actually, over the last few years, been compiling notes for a few books. Some of them will be based on true experiences, and I've got some other crazy ideas, too, about how I really think things work. So be on the lookout for that. I'm going to try to finish at least one of those up this winter while I'm locked indoors in the snow. I'm from Florida.
Absolutely. I say, hey, whenever you finish them, let us know. We would love to certainly, promote it on the show and get that out there to the listeners so that they can check it out, pick up a copy of the book and maybe get you back on to certainly pick your brain a little bit about the book itself. So you'll have to certainly keep us posted here.
Okay, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much. And again, my name is Barbara Suzanne.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show tonight, and we'll catch you sometime soon.
Thank you too, Garrett. Appreciate it.
No problem. You take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. All right, guys, we have another caller on the line. We're going to let her tell you who she is, where she's from, and what it is that she's experienced. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. My name's Teresa, and I live in upstate New York. And my whole life has been a series of weird experiences. The most notable one was when I was being baptized into the Mormon church, and I got swallowed up by a white light. And at first I thought it was just fluorescent lights bouncing off the gown into my eyes. But when a woman came up to me after the ceremony, she told me that she saw it. And she said that the white light came from the floor and just swallowed me right up, which is why two of the elders had to grab me and guide me to the pew because I couldn't see. And I didn't know what that was. Nobody knew what that was, but a man that I used to know a long time ago that wasn't into, he researched different religions and beliefs, and he told me that it was that baptism woke my spirituality. So that's what I'm going with. I've since found out that I'm an empath, and now I've recently found out there's all kinds of different empaths. So now I have to figure out which one of those applies to me, because I read people, and I've been called psychic I don't know how many times, and I don't believe in any of that. I'm kind of a mix of pragmatist and spiritualist, but I still need the proof to believe it.
Well, it's good to go in. It's good to go in skeptical and figure out for yourself what you believe, and not necessarily go off of anything else. You experience it. You have to figure out, okay, first, how can I explain this? And if I can't explain it, then okay, maybe there's something going on beyond that. Your spiritual awakening. Your spiritual awakening is it a big moment as well? You said you've seen the light. I mean, people in life will have them. Some people don't. But when you have a spiritual awakening, I had one myself a while back, and it was amazing. So I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, that's a great thing to hear that you experienced.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it had. I think the empathic part might be something that runs in my family, because I grew up in a haunted house. And when I was a kid, I didn't know that it was haunted because I didn't know anything about it. I just understood that there was a loving presence in my room that comforted me when I was crying. And there was an evil presence, a man that just took great pleasure in scaring the women in the house. But I didn't find out that I wasn't the only one who could feel those ghosts until my cousin came to my mother's new house about 20 years later. And she didn't know that we used to live in the house where she's babysitting. And she said that house gives her the creeps, and she can't figure out why. And when she told us the address, that's when all the ghost stories started coming out.
Okay. Yeah, I grew up in a haunted house myself, and there was a lot of activity in that house. It's been the subject on a lot of the different shows, which is what got me into paranormal investigation and then ultimately making the radio show. But it was, there was a couple different presences there that would, be known all the time. And it was strange because my family and any friends and things that came over and visited always felt it too. I mean, you could feel it in this place. My mom still owns that home. I love that house, but just a very, very strange place, a portal of sorts. And it kind of led me into this side. And I'm a little bit of an empath myself. I pick up a lot of things, not so much from people, I can read people sometimes pretty good, but locations and things, I can feel certain feelings when I'm in an investigation at a certain place. Sometimes there's a room automatically I can just feel the energy from a hallway away, and I'm like, that's where I need to be. And I go there and you start to notice the most activity. It's just like I can automatically sense it.
Yeah, that's I've got that ability. I actually saved my husband's life in 2012. I was at work and he was 12 miles away at home, and he sent me a text that set off my spidey senses like they had never been triggered before. And I just blew it off because I didn't believe that anybody could. You can't, as far as I was concerned, you can't read someone else's emotions by what they write in a text. But my spidey senses, my intuition kept pounding on me and just real hard. So I thought, well, I'm never going to get any peace, so I might as well call him, and if I can read his voice, I'll know, just by talking to him if something's wrong. Well, I called him, and oh my God, did it ever get worse? And he said he hadn't been feeling good all day, and I said, well, get to the hospital, because he's got that mesothelioma.
Okay, yeah, definitely need to then get it checked out.
Yeah, and I knew something was seriously wrong, but I had no idea what it was. And he promised me he'd go to the hospital. And then I hung up and I went, such an idiot. He's not going to go. He just lied to me. So I left work and I made him go to the hospital, and the doctor told him that they found an aneurysm on the mitral valve of his heart. His blood pressure was 279. And if I hadn't acted when I did, he would have been dead before I got home from a massive heart attack.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, it's great that you knew to follow your gut, because the most thing I notice is a lot of people, everybody has powers and some type of psychic ability to an extent. And I think most people ignore it, and some people feel that sometimes they have strange feelings or they have a thought in their head and they're like, whatever, it's nothing, and then they don't go with it, and unfortunately can lead to other things. Whereas sometimes if you act on it, such as you did, it saved your husband's life. So that's incredible that you knew to go with your gut and you knew what you were feeling was beyond just a normal feeling.
Oh yeah, because this was like never before. It was I didn't know what the emergency was. I just knew it was directed at him. And I had to do something, and, my only mistake, the fatal mistake, if I had not smartened up when I did, my fatal mistake would have been believing him that he's going to go to the hospital in 10 minutes. Because he hates hospitals. He's hated them ever since his mother died in one, and I knew that, so it would have been a very fatal mistake for him if I had made that mistake.
Well, absolutely. I'm glad you went with your gut, because, you're right. He probably wouldn't have went to the hospital. Us as guys don't usually try to go to the hospital more than we have to. We all know we're good. We'll beat this. We'll get past this, without anything.
Yeah.
It's just kind of built into us, and that can obviously be bad. And in that case, he probably wouldn't have went, so you saved his life, and that's great. I'm glad that happened.
Yeah, me too. But I think it's just that I was never taught to ignore basic instincts, and because of that, my instincts got extremely sharp. Because I've been reading people since I was 7 years old.
Okay. Yeah, it's good to know when to go by, because sometimes you, like I said, you just feel it, and if you know to go with your gut, to go with your instincts, then usually you're going to be right. It's not often that you're wrong.
Yeah, my husband doesn't like that, because he says, you're such a know-it-all. I was like, yeah, but I said, I'm 100 for 100. I'm always right. Like, the doctors have told you that. They keep telling him, listen to your wife.
He just needs to listen. He just needs to listen to you and make sure he's following your lead, because you're not gonna lead him wrong from the sounds of it.
Oh yeah, but he's got that male pride. He's like a 50s baby, so he's misogynistic, and he's got that male pride, and that's what's going to kill him if he doesn't smarten up, if I don't kill him first.
Yeah, you just have to train them piece by piece, I guess. My wife's had to train me a little bit because there's a lot of times I wouldn't have went either. If something was wrong, I'm good. And then now anymore, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go. I'm going to get it fixed. I'm going to get over it and get back to my everyday life, so I'm not slowed down, because all it does is end up slowing you down if you don't go get it taken care of.
Yeah, I agree. And I wish you could train my husband to think like that, because the one thing he said to me that he really meant is, I'm never going to change. I was like, you'll change when you're dead.
Yeah. Some of us won't change. I mean, I've adapted to change a little bit, but I'm still stubborn in my ways. I'm a Taurus, so I'm very, very bullheaded.
Yeah, well, he's just from the 50s, and he thinks men should be tough and shouldn't whine. And I mean, I can relate to that because I was raised in the 70s, and if you whined or complained, you got your butt kicked. That was a magnet for bullies. So you learn to keep your mouth shut and deal with your own problems.
That's it, though. But yeah, unfortunately, the world is a little bit different these days than it was back then, because there's a lot of morals that aren't in place anymore. That kids do need to suck it up, man up, and and take care of what they need to take care of, but also know when it's time to go to the hospital or something like that. Got to get the mixture of both worlds. Now, you told us obviously a little bit of psychic ability, a little bit of spiritual awakening that happened to you. Anything else when you think of profound experiences that you've had in your life that just stand out to you?
Yeah, I scared the hell out of a friend's love interest. She was this girl I used to work with. She was hot for the owner's son of this business that her and I worked at, and we all decided. She did chase him for 6 months. He seemed oblivious to it all, but she convinced him to go out drinking with us one night. So we went back to his mother's donut shop, and he's on my left and she's on my right, and I'm just totally wasted, and they're talking with me in the middle, so I'm in an awkward third wheel position. It's like, great. So I just did my thing. I just zoned out and focused on the clock, so I couldn't hear the conversation. Next thing I know, I'm feeling this. I got this weird feeling invading me on the left side, and I thought, it snapped me out of my trance, and I went, okay, I'm just self-talking. I went, okay, just calm down. Let it come in and just read it, find out what this is. Well, I realized that it was him I was reading him, and I was getting a real story on how he really felt about my roommate. And I thought, okay, this is cool. So I just kept reading it, and I got all that information, and I didn't say a word because I'm not, it's none of my business. So I figured if he wants her to know, he'll tell her. Okay. And then about 2 weeks later, she goes, I'm sick and tired of chasing him, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to dump him. I said, no, don't. And then I opened up and I told her what I knew. And she says, how did you find out? I said, I can't explain it. Just trust me. I know what I'm talking about. And then she come home that night and she goes, remember what you told me about Richard? And I said, yeah. She says, how did you know? I said, I don't know. I just knew. I don't understand how it happened. I just knew. And she goes, I said, why? She said, because he just told me everything you've told me verbatim tonight. And she said, and when I said, yeah, I already know because Teresa told me. She said he freaked because he never told anybody, so there's no way I could have found out. I said, I wouldn't have asked around anyway because it's none of my business. I said, I just knew. Next thing I know, she's calling me psychic. But I think it was just I was reading his energy, and because his feelings were so strong and he was so close, it was like I was reading his mind. But there was this sensation down the left side of my body which told me where it was coming from. So I knew it was him. And to me, this is like story time to a child. It's like my entertainment, and I keep my mouth shut because I know it scares people.
It's interesting because, when you meet someone that has, more tuned in psychic abilities, because like I said, I believe everyone has the ability. I just believe that 90% of people don't tap into that. They don't pay attention to it and ignore it because, truthfully, you have to have a certain mindset or meditate and things like that a lot of times to really tap into these type of powers. Some people it just naturally shines through. But it's always amazing when you pick up those things. And there's been small things. By no means do I think I'm a psychic, but there's been moments in life where I just knew things that I couldn't know. It was impossible to know, but I knew. And then I'm like, wow, I just had a sense. I went with it. I knew to follow it. It's amazing. Like I said, it's out there. So it's incredible to hear that you've had some pretty in tune psychic ability and spiritual side of things happening to you, which is always great. It's better than some of the dark stories I hear, because I hear a lot of different stories, and some people are like, "Oh, I have a house of just pure evil," and it's okay to hear those, because those are interesting stories as well. But it's nice to hear the enlightened spiritual ones as also.
Yeah. Well, I'm a professional cleaner, and some houses I feel really uncomfortable in. Like when I go to do the walkthrough, I'm getting a feeling of what's in this house, and there's a few houses I've had to turn down because I can't be in the house. I don't feel comfortable. It just vibrates my nerves, and that's a bad sign.
Yeah, you got to avoid that, because if you are someone who picks up feelings, as you already said, like me, you do sense it, and sometimes you just walk into certain places and instantly it's just a feeling that can't really be described, and there's a thickness to it, and it's like, oh wow, you feel it wash over you. And it's like I don't really want to be inside this building right now. I want to get the hell out of here.
Yep, that's exactly how it happens. Like my daughter, we toured one of the dorms on SUNY Plattsburgh's campus, and she got in that building. And this kid is like Princess and the Pea kind of sensitive. My house had to be immaculate because she was dirt phobic, and she couldn't stand being in any place that was filthy or dirty. Like just lived in was too much for her. Okay. So she walked into this dorm, and I could see she was uncomfortable. She didn't like it, but I thought it was a social anxiety thing. This is all new, and she doesn't adapt. So I just put my arm around her and tried to make her feel safe, and we walked through, and as soon as the RA opened her door and my daughter saw the mess, she went, "I'm not living here," and she left. And then later on, she told me that she doesn't feel comfortable in that building. It scares her.
Okay.
Yeah. And
sometimes
the building
you just
was
get the feelings. Sometimes it just emanates the energy that passed through it over the years, and maybe there's a ley line underneath there, somewhere where there's energy that's coming from the ground more than other places. I'm a big believer in metaphysics and how energy plays into feelings and sightings and encounters, and I think that there's a lot of places that just emanate certain type of energies.
Oh yeah, I used to work at the college, SUNY Plattsburgh, and I heard all the ghost stories about McDonough Hall. And my husband was down there because he worked in the powerhouse, and he had to go down in the basement of that building, and he heard the guys talking about ghost stories, and I thought that was kind of unusual because these are macho guys that don't believe in any of that.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, they got their own ghost adventures, and I'm like, wow. And so I wanted to go down there just to see if I could pick anything up. And there was something about the basement. I felt like I was being watched, and I felt like that when I was living in my childhood home that was haunted. Always felt like I was being watched, like it was just unbelievable. And I got the same feeling in McDonough Hall's basement. And there was one of the students come running out of there all upset, and she said that she saw a ghost and something touched her, but nothing was there. And well, I'm really curious about that.
That's interesting. Like I said, when you know. I do a lot of investigations as well, so I sometimes do put myself in the places where you feel certain energies. You're like, wow, that's powerful. But sometimes, as long as it doesn't feel completely, evil of sorts, I try to talk to and communicate and see what I can figure out on it. Obviously, if I walk into a room and it just feels like, the gates of hell, I'm going to kind of turn around and walk away. But I have experienced things like that, though, unfortunately. And I've talked about that on some past shows, that I've experienced some very demonic things because I've done a lot of different, mediumships, a lot of different meditative states, investigating buildings and things like that. And I was at a place recently that had a very electric feeling, and I walked into this room, and I'm used to feeling certain types of feelings, but this, when I walked in, it was just I can't even explain the feeling. Instantly, the entire room just felt like it was buzzing, like around me. And I was with a group of other people touring, and I didn't know any of them. I went there by myself, and no one else seemed to notice. Everybody walked through just like, oh, this is cool, this and that, looking around. And the whole time I'm in that room, like, oh, wow. I came back down during my investigation now, and it didn't feel like that any longer. And I sat there for about 45 minutes, didn't get anything happen in that specific room. But when I walked through the first time, when they opened the building up for the night and only a few of us went through, you could tell that something was there, but to a level that I've never experienced as far as a buzz and a thick feeling.
Yeah.
It was like suffocating almost.
Yeah, I've had that. I was in a dead sleep, and I was diagnosed with PTSD, and I spent 8 years in therapy dealing with it. And most of the demons that I was dealing with were attempts on my life. And apparently, according to the doctor, I had buried the trauma so deep that it had become body trauma. They couldn't hypnotize it out of me. They couldn't do no therapy was working.
Wow.
So I just had to talk it out and try to recall the memories. And the day that she told me that I buried the memory so deep it became body trauma was the day I guess that opened up a gate to let those memories come back, because that night I had a dream that there was somebody in my bedroom that was trying to kill me. He was dressed in buckskin. And when it scared me so bad, I woke up, and I know I was awake because I looked at the clock, and it was 1:13 in the morning. And I could feel him. He was still in the room with me, and I'm wide awake, and that freaked me right out. That scared the hell out of me. And then I started thinking about it all through the day, and I realized he's wearing buckskin. Okay, so I got to go back to the reservation where those kids tried to kill me. I got to face this. And as soon as I faced, it was like a message from the grave or something, because as soon as I went back to Lake Victoria and walked through and forced myself to face everything that happened, it's like all the memories and all the feelings started flooding in, and I could finally put it to rest. And
Wow.
It was, it was just, but that was so real, and he scared me so bad that I'm not sure if it was just I was paralyzed because of fear, or if it was a sleep paralysis. I couldn't move.
It sounds like to me, it does. It sounds like you might have had an experience with some type of, the buckskin's interesting, but I was going to say, it sounds like you had some type of experience with something like, a shadow person, because the shadow people often will, show up, they scare the hell out of you, they give you just this wicked fear most of the time. You can't really move your body, and it's like wild hallucinations, and they come in your sleep, but you're awake. You wake up and you can't move, they're there, you start to have like almost crazy hallucinations and feelings. And it's usually mostly of fear. So that's what that sounds like to me.
Yeah, I couldn't see him, but I knew he was there because I was terrified, and I was buried in pillows and blankets because that's the way I sleep, and I could feel myself just like I don't know if I was doing it without realizing it, but I was paralyzed, and I felt like I was going deeper and deeper into the bed and hiding from him. And I didn't see the buckskin right away, but the memory started, the more I started thinking about that dream, the more I realized this is an Indian, and the first murder attempt on my life happened on the Indian Reserve. So there's symbolism here, and this is I thought it was a message, and why it's he tried to smother me. That's what woke me up, sent me out of it, is that I was suffocating, and I couldn't move to shake it off. So I had to talk myself out of it and just, do whatever I could. And I woke up and I went, okay, why is this feeling still with me? And it was the most powerful thing I'd ever felt in my life. And I wasn't sure if it was just PTSD, a night terror. I didn't know what it was. So I had to go looking, and I just decided I got to go back where this happened and see if this is what it is.
Well, I think you were right. I think it was a symbol of some sort, and that's the thing. Once again, and I don't, mean to beat a dead horse with this, but when you when you feel and see signs and you know to watch out for them and you follow them, it usually leads you somewhere. And I think for some reason or another, you had a visitation of sorts that, caused a hallucination, caused a vision of some sort to make you think, okay, I need to go back there. And you said you felt clarity afterwards, and you came, one-to-one with terms, and that's good. I mean, obviously there was a reason for that, but I mean, I do believe that does sound like classic sleep paralysis / shadow person visitation, because of the fear, the knowing the presence is there, the not being able to breathe and feeling smothered but not being able to move, knowing you're awake but almost kind of like you're sleeping. So very incredible. Yeah. We get a lot of stories about sleep paralysis and shadow people. It seems to be more prevalent than I would ever have imagined. When I started the show and my research, I'd hear about shadow people, but when I really started diving into talking to people and interviewing people from all over, I was surprised at time and time again, there's shadow people visitations and sleep paralysis. And I'm like, wow, it ends up being, to me, the most prevalent thing happening in the paranormal realm.
Yeah.
Other than ghost sightings themselves.
Yeah, and back then I didn't know anything about shadow people. I started watching all these ghost shows on TV around Halloween just because I think it's fun. And it's Halloween, so this is what you do. And then I got really interested because I started learning and started getting answers. And I thought, okay, I need to go in this direction because I'm finally going to get the answers that, I've been in and out of every church and every religion trying to get answers, and all they do is call me possessed. And I went, go away. I'm not possessed. And,
they don't like people talking about that stuff a lot of times. If you're into talking to heavy religious people, and you start talking about ghosts and shadow people and dimensions and things, they tend to get a little bit upset.
Well, the weird thing is that when that white light swallowed me up, it was right in front of the Mormon congregation, and they still had the nerve to call me possessed. And one woman said, I don't know what it is about you, but there's something very special, because I've been to a lot of baptisms, and I have never seen anybody swallowed up by a white light like you were.
Well, she apparently had the gift as well, so everybody else just seen a normal baptism, but yes, she spotted it because she knew to see the signs.
No, they all saw it because the elders grabbed me when they realized, two elders grabbed me to guide me to the pew because they realized that I was blinded by this light and I couldn't see it. Like I couldn't see, it was so bright I couldn't see anything. And I didn't think anything of it because I wasn't, my gifts were still secret, and I was still trying to privately figure this out on my own. And this is why I was joining the church, because I figured they might say something that will click and I can figure this out. But I never showed anybody because the first time that I got busted, because these are spontaneous, it happens spontaneous. I don't make this happen. It just happens, and then I get busted the odd time. And I ended up with a lineup out my door of people wanting me to tell them their future. As it was, and that's what I think is nuts, because I don't believe in any of that. I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I believe that there's certain people that can tell certain things, like I said, but I don't believe so much so in the fact of someone who can sit down with 30 people in a row and read 30 people fully and tell them what's going to happen, and you're able to do that whenever you want. As you said, it comes and goes when it wants to come and go. I don't think that people have full control over that. Now, like I said, through meditation and things, you can tap into it and learn to control it a lot more. It's amazing what you can do through meditation, but to be fully in control that every single person I touch, everything I see, I can tell you your future, I can tell you this, I'm a little skeptical. But I'm someone who's done tarot for a long time, and I do tarot mainly for myself. But I've had some absolutely mind-bending tarot readings before that just fit so perfectly. So I believe that there are things that you can pick up signs from, but I don't believe that you can just simply tell the future and be able to predict everything. I don't believe that.
No, and I had to shut it down. Like I can turn it off, because being able to read everybody's energy, I can't be in public places without being negative, because it's the negative thinking that I use to turn it off so that I can function in public. Because otherwise I get overwhelmed, and because I'm getting energy being shot at me from all over the place, and it's just a jumble of whatever. And you can't read that. That's like having 4 books thrown at you at once and you got to read them all at the same time. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, if you're that perceptive, yeah, you would have to learn almost to shut it off. Because I mean, mine comes and goes in certain spurts. But if you're picking it up constant, you do have to find a way to almost shut that part of your mind off when you're trying to do daily things.
Oh yeah, I had to stop drinking because it would relax my mind so much that I could absorb more energy and read everybody even worse than I can when I'm sober. So I can't drink because that works against me.
Yeah,
but
I mean, you got to know your limitations. You got to know if that's a trigger of sorts. You just need to stay away from it.
Oh yeah, and I just use negative thinking. I just turn into a skeptic and just refuse to believe any of it, and then I shut it off that way.
Well, but still make sure you're open enough that you can pick up the signs, like the time with your husband and things. Those are important to still make sure to spot out the important times.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can control it as far as, you know, I'm open-minded and optimistic just by nature. But, you know, when I'm in public places, I have to shut it off. But it doesn't shut it off completely. It just shuts it off so that all of the energy in the room can't invade me and overwhelm me, because that kind of thing, it drains the life right out of you.
Well, I'm sure it would. Constantly having those feelings is tiresome. I mean, even when I have them, or even whenever I experience a very profound paranormal encounter during one of my investigations, a lot of times it is pulling energy. Once again, always getting back to the metaphysics of things. And when I can feel a lot of times after a very heavy encounter, I'm just exhausted. I'm like, oh man, I could lay, in the corner and go to sleep right now, but I still push through. But by the end of my nights of my investigations, every time I'm absolutely just exhausted, ready to climb in bed.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
Well, great. I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay.
I was going to say, well, great. I mean, I think you definitely shared some, amazing stories and amazing experiences that you have had, and I think the fans are going to love what you have to say. Did you have anything you wanted to close out with?
No, it's pretty much that all I can remember. It's, it's a spontaneous memory, too.
Absolutely.
I mean, I remember the life-changing stuff. Like that stuff you just don't forget. But, there's little things that happen. I just trivialize it because I'm still trying to make sense of it. I've been searching for answers for over 35 years.
Well, sometimes there isn't sense to be had. Let me just say that. Sometimes you just can't make sense of certain things. In fact, I've experienced a lot that I just truly can't make sense of, but that's okay. It's why it's fascinating. It's why, we have shows like this, and we have people like yourself that call in and want to talk about it, because it is amazing. It's something that really, it enthralls you and says, how is this happening? What is happening? What's the reason that I have this power? Things of that nature. So it's always pretty cool. But we want to thank you, obviously, for coming on the show, Teresa, and we'll talk to you next time.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Hey, no problem. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.